Hello. Today on Sustainable Energies TV, I show you how to wire up your batteries. Welcome back. And it's Kevin Pumala with Sustainable Energies here. So today we're going to go over what's involved in wiring batteries. So what we have here is this lovely array of 8 batteries. I'm going to connect them 3 different ways to show you the common voltages that are available. It's important to note that there's a number of different ways that you can wire batteries. You certainly have to set them up in such a way that you match what your inverter needs, but it's pretty simple, and I'm going to go over all that with you today so you can make sure that when you're connecting your batteries, it's always done properly. So, all right, what we have here are 8 batteries, like I mentioned. They are from a lovely company called Trojan Batteries. This is their Solar Premium Series. These are SPRE 06415. So they're a 6 volt, 415 amp hour at 100 hours battery. So in simple terms, that is, if you were to drain the batteries consistently for for 100 hours, you could drain 4.15 amp hours per hour for 100 hours for a total of 415 amp hours. In simple terms, that's what they use for slow discharge batteries. Solar, typically, you're not drawing huge amounts of power at any one time. You can, but it's more that you're drawing a smaller amount of power over a long period of time, which is why they test them based on 100 hours. Some batteries are tested based on a 20-hour discharge cycle. So anyways, what we have here are 6 volt batteries. The way it works is the common systems that are out there are going to be 12, 24, or 48 volt, okay? So it's kind of nice that you get these nice even quantities. What we have here is going to be able to do 4 groupings of 12 volt batteries, 2 groupings of 24 volts, or 1 grouping of 48. I'll start with the 12 volt and we'll go from there. So the cables I have here are going to be, if we can see them in there, these are just simple jumper cables I made. They have these little battery terminal ends like this, just clamps. These are just for me for charging. In an actual system, you're going to use cables that have an eyelet and they'll be bolted onto these. But for just demonstration purposes, this shows just fine. So yeah, so what I'm going to do now, these are my series cables and I made them in a very specific way. So if you take a look, each cable has on one end a black end and on the other end it's red. And that's what we have to do with series connections, all right? These are my parallel cables, so we'll have black on each end, or we will have red on each end, all right? And so basically what happens with series and parallel, you'll probably hear that thrown around a lot. Parallel will keep the voltage the same, but it will add the amperage together. So in the case of these 415 amp hour batteries, if we had 2 groupings of, or like 2 batteries put together, what we would have is a 6 volt, 830 amp hour battery. If I just simply took the positive terminals here and the negative terminals here and put them together, then that's what that would be. If you put them in series, what you end up getting is you're adding the voltages together and the amperage stays the same. So then at that point, we'd connect the negative to the positive on another. Then we have our main positive and our main negative on each battery individually. And then what you end up with is a 12 volt, 415 amp hour battery. I'm going to show you here what it looks like to hook up a 12 volt setup. 12 volt, what we would do is I'm going to take the middle terminals. I've got these all set up the same way. So what we have are negative terminals across this side, positive terminals across this side, and it's the exact same for this grouping of 4 batteries here as well. So I'm going to take my cable, positive end, red, I'm going to put here. So this will give me, well, if it went on there nicely, this is going to end up giving me 12 volts between these 2 terminals right here, okay? And I'm actually going to go grab a voltmeter and show you on the voltmeter as well what we have, okay? Okay, so I've got the voltmeter over here. It's set to DC volts. And just for reference, I'm going to check here. On the 1 battery, I've got 6.39 volts, okay? I go over to this battery, I have 6.38 volts. Now, if I go from here to here, I have 12.77 volts, okay? And so if I wanted to set this entire battery bank up as a 12-volt battery bank, I would do the same thing with the series cables, which I'll show you here. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing on this guy. Connect the positive to the negative over here. There we go. And the same thing over on this guy. Positive to negative. And positive to negative over here. And now each of these groupings, so these two, these two, these two, and these two, I'll give you 12 volts each. Just for reference, I'm going to show with the voltmeter here as well. So again, we have, hopefully you can see this in the camera. Again, here we have, in this case, 6.37 volts, 6.33 volts, and then if I go from corner to corner, I have 12.71, 12.70, okay? And we'll go over here. You may not be able to see that, but I'll see if I can put it there. Again, okay, 6.33. On this one, I have 6.37, and from end to end, I have 12.69, okay? And let's see if we can still make this visible. And here we have 6.37, 6.35, and from end to end, we have 12.71, all right? So, that would be 4 separate 12-volt batteries, basically, made up of these 8. Now, if we want to turn it into a 12-volt battery bank that can then have an inverter connected to it, and then that would provide you with your household power, we need to take our parallel cables here, and we need to start combining these groups together. So I'm going to take, it doesn't really matter which order you do them in, but I'm going to take the negative cable here and connect it on this one. And I'm going to go over to here. So what that's doing is that's taking the negative connection between this group of batteries and this group of batteries and puts them together. Then I'm going to take my positive cable, do the exact same thing here, but it's going to be off of the different battery because this battery is the one with the positive connection on it. And it's the far battery on this end with the positive connection on it. And so now we will have 2 12-volt battery banks put together. Then I can do the same thing over here. And the same thing on the positive. Okay, there There we go. Now we have 4 groupings, but they're not connected to each other, okay? So what we have is they're connected. These 2 groups are connected, those 2 groups are connected, but all 8 are not connected together. So now what we're gonna have to do is, on one end or the other, connect between each set side to side here. So if you can see in this one, I'm gonna put another connector on this same, won't have a lot of room here, but anyways, another connector over on this guy, and it's gonna connect to here. And then if I do the same thing on the positive, which is over here, to over here, now we're gonna have all of these batteries connected together. And when I'm going to check this to get the final power output, and where I'm going to connect my inverter would end up being, it could be anywhere that the parallel connections are together, but ideally what you would probably do is you would connect them on the ends over here. So you'd end up connecting somewhere like here on this terminal, and then over, let's say, on this terminal. So, but we'll take a look here at the voltmeter, and I will confirm for you what power we have where. And yeah, that is a 12 volt, let's call it a complex 12 volt battery bank. And just for reference, some manufacturers don't recommend going with this many in parallel. I'm not going to suggest it myself, but certain applications it might make sense. Usually you want to stick to 4 or less groups of batteries in parallel. This happens to be 4, so I don't particularly recommend this. This is more just for, I guess more for descriptive purposes. But yeah, I wouldn't generally do a configuration like this, but to show you how it can work, this is, like I said, a 4 battery bank, 12 volt battery setup, okay? So, looking back at this, we're gonna go, hopefully this is visible. If not, oh well. Okay, so looking at where these connections are made. So if I go from here to here, for example, I get 12.72, 12.71 volts, okay? Any other place where the parallel connections are made, so for example, here to here, I'm gonna get the same 12.72, there to like here, 12.72, so it's all the same. As long as you're looking between where the parallel connections are made, you're gonna get your 12.72 volts in this case. And if I'm going over here, where I would actually be connecting the inverter, for example, or the charge controller to a battery bank like this, I would set that up there. I would probably make the connection over here where I've got a positive here, and I'd probably put the negative over here, which if you look, we're getting our, pardon me, over here. Silly me. That was 6 volts here. And this is going to give us 12.72 volts. So if you were to do something like that, basically then it's making it so that no one specific battery should be getting any more power than the others. So I always try to get it so that your complete circuit involves every battery as much as you can. So yeah, that is a 12 volt battery bank. Okay, so we're back, and I've got the battery bank layout here again, but I've got none of the wires connected. So what we're gonna do is we are going to set it up as a 24 volt battery bank, okay? So like I said at the very beginning, 24 volt battery bank with 8 batteries that are all 6 volt batteries. we can actually get 2 banks at 24 volt. So the way we're going to do that is, just trying to get these out of the way a little bit here, make a little nicer visual. Okay. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to hook up 4 together in series, and that'll add 6 volts to 6 volts, and then add another 6 volts, which gets us to 18 volts, and then add another 6 volts, which gets us to 24 volts, okay? So I'll show you that also with the voltmeter, that as I add, we get that additional power. So I'll connect the first one here. Again, negative, black to negative, red to positive. Go to the next one. Black to negative, red to positive. And then again, black to negative, red to positive. Sneak that over there. Okay, so now we'll take out the voltmeter. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, and what we have here is on the first battery, we have our 6.38 volts. Now if I go to the second battery terminal, now I'm going to have 12.72. I go to the third battery terminal, I'm going to have my 19.1. And I go to the fourth terminal, and you can see I got 25.45. So as long as, so if I want a 24 volt source for like an inverter, or if I want to connect a charge controller at 24 volts, I'm going to make a connection for positive here and negative over here. And the difference between the two gives me that 24 volt battery bank. So let me do the exact same thing on the other side. And then I'll also show you how to connect 2 24 volt battery banks in parallel. Okay, so again, we're going to go negative to positive, negative to positive, negative to positive, and then, okay. So now we're going to take our parallel cables, and what I'm going to do here, we have our main negative terminals on this end of the battery bank over here. We have our positive ends on that end. So I'm going to go like this, connect the negative over here, and positive over here. And now what we'll have, anywhere that these parallel connections meet, they're all going to be the same. So if I measure here to here, we have 25.44 volts. And that will make up a 24 volt battery bank. And for connection purposes, what I would generally do with a battery bank like this, again, to balance it as best as possible, what I would end up doing is I would probably use the positive terminal on this end, and I'd use the negative terminal over on this end. And what that's going to do for you is, again, make it so that a complete circuit will actually have to go through the whole thing. It just tends to be a better way to make sure that each individual battery is going to get the proper amount of charge, and it'll be discharged at a fairly even rate. It's not going to make a huge difference, but it helps a little bit, so you might as well. And what some people even will do is connect the inverter on one side, connect the charge controller on the other, things along those lines. Again, as long as you're using a heavy enough battery cable, it's not going to make much of a difference, but it can make somewhat of a difference. At the end of the day, when you're using lead acid batteries, you're going to need to get them back in balance from time to time anyways, and usually that's going to mean equalizing the battery bank. But that we will save for a future video. So, all right, now let's move on to a 48 volt battery bank. Okay, and we're back. And let us hook up these 8 batteries as a 48-volt battery bank. All right, so first thing to do is realize that we have to put them all together in one series group. And, well, we've already seen how to do that with the 12 and the 24 volt. This isn't going to be very much different. The only thing is we just have to connect around the whole circuit. So what I'm going to do is basically repeat exactly what we did on the previous ones. I'm going to take all of these and just start adding them up. So we go from 6 to 12 volt. 12 volt to 18 volt. And then 18 volt to 24 volt. I probably should have taken these bolts out of there, but anyways. And then I'm just going to do the same thing we had before. So for simplicity, I'll just add that. So that goes from 6 to 12, 12 to 18 volt, 18 volt to 24 volt. And now what we need to do is end up connecting Okay, so I realized that I guess ideally the arrangement of the batteries is not perfect for 48 volt. There's different ways you can do it, but from a simplicity standpoint, it's just easier for me to grab a longer cable. So I just grabbed this here booster cable. Again, this is not how I would be connecting these batteries. However, for simplicity's sake, it's a lot easier for me to show this with the with cables set up like this. So, okay. So what I'm going to do here, just keep in mind that because this is just a generic set of jumper cables, the negative and positive connectors are connected to each other. Red is red, black is black. Each end is the same. So that doesn't quite work for my color scheme that I went with here. But what I'm going to do is just simply hook up, let's say, the red one here, which is actually being connected to a negative terminal, but either way. And I'll bring this one over here and hook it to this guy, okay? So now what we have is effectively 24 volts on this side, 24 volts on that side. You add 24 volts together, you get 48. So again, I'll show that with the voltmeter. So let me just show you what we got here. Oh boy. Okay. And I'm actually going to move over here and check it from this side. So what you'll notice is that on the battery bank, I've got 2 vacant terminals. That's this guy over here, positive, and that guy over there, the negative. So I just have to measure those. So if I was to measure anything along the line, it's like what I had said. This is going to be basically 6 volts, 12 volts, 18 volts, etc. If I go over to here, for example, that's actually 38 volts. And then we're up to 44 volts. And by the time I go to this guy, we add that other 6, and we're actually up to 50.8. So keep in mind that a battery, when it reaches its rated voltage, so for example, 6 volts, at 6 volts, a battery is actually dead, okay? So a 6 volt battery range will go from approximately 6 volts up to 6.8, something in that range. It depends on the battery. It depends how they've configured them. I noticed that Rolls-Royce batteries tend to go to slightly higher voltages. In the industry, they're referred to as kind of a hot battery. So they have a little more battery acid in them than, for example, the Trojan batteries. But either way, they all function in the same sort of way. but that's one reason why it's very important when you're setting up a charge controller or an inverter to actually get into the battery settings and change your float voltage and bulk voltage and this kind of stuff to match your specific battery bank, okay? So there's a lot more to it than just, oh, I need batteries for this, plug it in, it works. There's something to designing it, there's something to actually setting it up properly. But of course, these are all things we're gonna go over in a future video. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video. That is how to configure 12 volt, 24 volt, or 48 volt batteries. Another video that I'm going to be doing will also cover things like battery gauge, or battery wire gauge, sorry, so that you make sure that the battery cables that you're using are all the proper size. As well, I'm going to go over things like how to connect charge controllers, how to connect inverters, all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, so I hope you enjoyed the video. That's all for today, and we'll see you in the next one.